Have you ever looked at France and just wondered what is going on over there? On the one hand, it's this pinnacle of high culture and enlightenment, but on the other, it seems to be the world capital of strikes, protests, and general gridlock. How can one country be both of those things at the same time? Yeah, think about it. You've got the romantic idea of France, right? The incredible art, the philosophy, the food, the fashion. But then you flip on the news and you see a completely different reality. Streets are completely paralyzed by strikes, public services have ground to a halt, and yeah, you see those burning rubbish bins. To anyone looking from the outside, it just looks like a country in a permanent state of chaos. So what gives? Is all this chaos a sign that the system is broken? Or could it be something else entirely? What if all of this disruption isn't a bug, but it's actually a feature, a kind of secret strength designed for a very, very specific purpose? Well, we're going to dig into a really powerful idea here, that this French willfulness, this tendency to create chaos, is actually a highly sophisticated societal immune system. And it has one job: to hunt down and destroy one very specific threat: totalitarianism. Now, to get how this immune system works, you first have to understand the virus it's built to fight. See, totalitarianism absolutely loves silence and perfect order. It wants society to run like this well-oiled machine with zero friction, where every single citizen is just a quiet, compliant little gear. Efficiency is everything. And this is where you see the huge clash. The totalitarian goal is a silent, obedient, efficient state. The French method? It is the exact opposite. It runs on friction, noise, and constant defiance. It's like the French decided a long, long time ago that a messy, loud, and inefficient country is a pretty small price to pay for freedom. But look, this isn't just people being angry for no reason. This whole societal immune system is fueled by some really deep-seated philosophical principles. It's like a fortress built on a foundation of some seriously powerful ideas. Okay, so a key pillar here comes from the philosopher Karl Popper. It's a concept called falsifiability. It sounds complicated, but it's simple. For any idea to be considered valid, you have to be able to test it and potentially prove it wrong. Popper said this applies to societies too. A healthy society has to have the power to challenge and falsify its government's ideas. And this is where you see it all click into place. French protest culture is falsifiability in action. Every single strike, every demonstration, it's a real-time public stress test on government policy. The people are basically standing up and saying, all right, here's your new idea. We are now going to try our absolute hardest to prove it's wrong. It's like a national peer review, just conducted in the middle of the street. You can even see this through the lens of behavioral economics. The French exhibit extreme loss aversion, meaning they will fight ferociously to defend the real, tangible freedoms they already have, like their 35-hour work week. At the same time, they use what's called hyperbolic discounting when it comes to politics. This just means they are deeply skeptical of politicians who ask them to sacrifice freedoms today in exchange for some vague promise of national glory tomorrow. They see that trade as basically worthless. Then you have another brilliant French philosopher, Michel Foucault. He talked about how all sorts of institutions, schools, offices, you name it, try to create docile bodies, people who are obedient, efficient, and easy to control. And of course, a population that just follows orders without question is the absolute bedrock of a totalitarian state. And the French seem to resist this at a gut level in all these big and small ways, questioning the boss, maybe a little strategic laziness on the job, defending the sacredness of a coffee break like it's a national monument. These aren't just funny little cultural quirks. They're tiny, daily acts of rebellion. They're a way of refusing to become just another obedient cog in somebody else's machine. Okay, so this brings us to the strategic side of all this, because it's not just philosophical. What we're watching is a high-stakes game of power between the people and the state. And you know what? The French are absolute masters of this game. In game theory, there's this really important concept called a credible threat. A credible threat is when you convince your opponent that you are 100% willing to follow through on what you say you'll do, no matter how much it costs you or them. Once they believe you, it totally changes how they play the game. And this is the credible threat that the French people signal to their government constantly. After decades of relentless strikes and protests, they have proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that if the state pushes them too far on their freedoms, they are willing and able to shut the entire country down, period. And that makes the price of tyranny unthinkably high.
So what this creates is a kind of stable, if pretty tense, balance. It's a predictable cycle. The state proposes some controversial new rule, the people erupt in protests and strikes, causing massive disruption. Then, after a lot of noise, a tense compromise is reached. But the crucial part, the final step, is that the state never crosses that fundamental red line on liberty. What makes this defense so incredibly effective is how unpredictable it is. Sun Tzu once said that your tactics should be like water, formless, fluid. Well, French protests are often totally leaderless. They just seem to bubble up from nowhere. A rigid, top-down government is built to crush an organized rebellion. But how do you crush something that has no head and flows everywhere at once? It's like trying to punch water. You just can't.
All right, let's pull all these threads together. It's time to completely reframe how we look at all this French chaos. Because it's not the sound of a society that's falling apart. No, it's the sound of something else entirely.
There's this really powerful metaphor used in the source material for this. A totalitarian state can easily control a flock of meek sheep, right? The kind who trade their freedom for a promise of safety and comfort. But what it can never, ever do is tame a society of proud, independent wildcats, where each one fiercely defends its own territory and questions every single move the authorities make.
And this all points to one last really incredible idea: anti-fragility. This constant struggle makes French society anti-fragile. It's a system that doesn't just survive shocks and chaos, it actually feeds on them. It gets stronger. Every protest, every strike is like an inoculation that makes the societal immune system tougher and more prepared for the next real threat to its liberty.
And so, we come back to that final, powerful image. Once you understand the deep logic at play here, you see those burning bins on a Paris street in a whole new light. They're not the noise of chaos. They're a signal. They are the sound of an air raid siren, proudly blaring out a warning to the entire world that freedom is being defended.
So that leaves us with a question to think about. Look, the French model is noisy, it's inefficient, and it can be really frustrating. But it works for them. So it's worth asking yourself, what's the healthy chaos in your own society? What are the little bits of friction and noise that we all put up with that might actually be secretly protecting the freedoms we so often take for granted? Something to chew on. Thanks for listening.